How are airports supposed to plan for infrastructure with unknown demand for drone or air taxi operations? And how does that differ based on the type of airport or role you play in aviation? So I'm going to start with you, Anwar.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would first like to say that patience is the key to progress. And SFO is fully behind the technology. We believe in it. You know, seeing is believing. I don't know how many of you folks have gone out to see the Joby air testing facility. It's a beautiful aircraft. The technology has legs and has a future. But what we are doing at SFO is we are very data-driven, and we are working with what is available out there. And there really isn't that much from the OEMs in terms of, say, you know, the requirements out there on the airfield. You know, whether it's jet blast or downwash, wake turbulence, et cetera, et cetera. We're aware of that. But we are positioning ourselves, and we've done quite a bit to be ready when the FAA comes to us and tells us, okay, SFO, in 2 months, you're going to have an eVTOL landing at your airport, and you have to accommodate it and service your passengers. And this is where I can mention that Berkeley's TSRC, we've retained Adam and his great team at Berkeley to assess various scenario planning. And also we have Landerman Brown, which is an airport planner, to assess the optimal sites for vertiports on the airport. And back to Berkeley, they are going to do a demand questionnaire to 20,000 passengers using our database on would you use eVTOL to get to SFO? Would it be intra-regional? And what price would you pay? Very fundamental questions which have not been asked really by any major airport from what I know. So we are doing everything that we can. We're being proactive, but we're also cautiously optimistic because we know this can take up to 10 years until it reaches scalability.
Well, thanks, Anwar. You know, UC Berkeley is really excited to be able to partner with several folks on the stage for different studies that are in the pipeline. And the one at SFO in particular is really important to try to help understand how airports can plan given kind of an uncertain environment. You know, we don't know that the use cases that are envisioned today are going to be the same ones that actually come to fruition 10 or even 15 years from now. So as I like to kind of describe it, you know, I think today is kind of our 1960 moment, okay? And so I put together this slide that I thought would be kind of helpful for folks. You know, a new world of flight will begin in 1969, and Pan Am will begin it. And you have this advertisement here for the 747 and for supersonics. And we all know how this kind of history kind of came about. And so is this kind of the dawn of the jet age where you know, JFK built kind of the world port that was quickly kind of became obsolete because they outgrew it? Or is this going to be like supersonics where Miami-Dade started building a whole airport for it that got canceled? Or LAX that thought about kind of building an island to accommodate supersonics and that never even got off the ground? And so these are, I think, really important kind of policy questions and trying to understand, you know, what are the indicators to watch? You know, and how can an airport understand when it's appropriate to enter and how much to scale is really a key question. Because ultimately, you know, if SFO or another airport kind of takes on a financial burden of this, it's going to get passed on to all passengers in the form of various fees. And so making sure that the infrastructure is scaled in an appropriate manner is really important.
And then Matt, from a more of a general aviation.
Absolutely, to add on to Adam's comment, this Pan Am picture reminds me, a little off topic, but things come and go fast. And so back in the 80s, Coca-Cola was the most highly recognized symbol in the world. Guess what number 2 was? It was Pan Am. So I think we need to be mindful of decisions that we make today that really do well for the future with our limited finances. So as a municipal airport where we don't realize PFCs or passenger facility charges, what is the low-hanging fruit, and how can we not overextend ourselves or get ahead of the skis for our airport? So I think the quickest answer to that is to really get involved with the classic 3Ps. And I hate to say that, but there's really no way a smaller budgeted airport can really be expected to enter with a 3-phase PG&E upgrade with electricity. What does it look like for building out a terminal, a vertiport? So I think those questions have to be asked, but I think at the end of the day, it's all data-driven. And if you don't have the data, it's hard to back up that case with your constituents and council members, mayor, people you walk and talk with on the street. So those are my 2 cents. So don't get ahead of your skis and make mindful, data-driven decisions.
If I could add to Matt's point on GAs, I mean, you guys are much more flexible than us. We are very congested Class B airspace, highly, really busy, right? 1,000 flight operations a day. But you also have land, right? So how do you guys think about maximizing your real estate as it ties into AAM? Have you incorporated that into your forward thinking yet?
Well, one idea we have is that at the end of the day, if we're land constrained at the Monterey Regional Airport or SFO, those aircraft have to go someplace. They have to RON. And so maybe a good case study would be to have Salinas or another airport proximate to a major airport, Class B airspace like SFO, where the airplanes RON, the eVTOLs RON, get light maintenance and charging, things like that. So we do have the space, we do have the availability for that. So it's one thing we're looking into. Again, it's got to be baked into some type of model where we do, at the end of the day, end up in the black, remain in the black. Another thing too is that a lot of the airports, we're blessed with a pretty good budget at the airport in Salinas, but other airports aren't so fortunate, and so it's going to be a challenge for airports that are in the red to help support this infrastructure. It can be done.
Can I bounce off?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So this is where I think the state plays a critical role. While we have a mandate to look for the safety of all airports, we really focus on general aviation when it comes to financial assistance. Salinas gets maybe not a whole lot of funding, but some support in terms of AIP match and some whatever other available funds. But if it's not enough to support airports with their existing infrastructure needs, how do we then support you with the infrastructure, energy infrastructure necessary for advanced air mobility? And I think that's where I think the state as a whole has to look at other agencies as well, such as the Energy Commission, such as GOVIS, and try to fully understand the GA's needs. And what we found through our SB 800 report is really, general aviation is the low-hanging fruit, and I think that's obvious to everybody here.
But I think you raised a good point, though, right? It is customer-driven at the end of the day, right? That airports and their analysis is really about what is their capacity, right? The airport doesn't begin until they have a customer, an airline or Aeromexico or Delta or United that says, we want to bring in we have additional customers, and then you begin that planning, right? So I would say the one light positive news is this isn't foreign. It's no different than another plane. It's no different than another aircraft. It's no different than another product that already exists in the airport. So anytime Boeing or another airline or another Airbus creates an airline, the airport doesn't redevise and re-ramp their entire plans, right? You look at the location of your airlines, you look at the capacity of your airport, you look at your charging, and then you can say, hey, we can encourage these types of customers. We can have this type of FBO or this type of client, right? So I think there's an understanding that you are already at the front lines, having the experience, having spent 50 years, in fact, evolving that ecosystem of aviation without panicking, right? Every time there's a new product or a new evolution. So I think that's what's exciting, is that you'll be able to bring that to fruition really quick. And I will say I do believe in the patience. It is going to take time. But the exciting thing is, and I'm not going to do justice to the numbers, but if you look at the evolution of the technology, from the invention of fire to the invention of the wheel, from wheel to the car was a couple hundred years, from the car to the plane was 50 years, right? So there's been leaps and bounds in the evolution, and so we need to have that expectation that, well, it shouldn't take 100,000 years to get from the plane or from the car to the plane or from plane to eVTOL. So that's something to be mindful of, as we have the capacity and the technology, and you're seeing it now at the federal level. Despite the kerfuffle or whatever the word is, the situations, there's still an inch. I may have misphrased that or maybe phrased it correctly, I'm not sure. There's definitely an interest in applying and understanding these technologies, how it can help support. And I think the number one element for Anwar and SFO and airports is safety. We will only do this if it's safe, and we will only do this if it's at your capacity. So I think working with the customers to get that is critical.
Yeah, safety and public trust.
Exactly.
That is absolutely critical.
And so, George, a follow-up question to you. So knowing you're here representing one OEM, you're representing Joby, and we found on the public side that each of them has a different model, business model. So how do you guys work with that on your end when you're talking to the airports? Because I'm sure, as you guys all said, all the companies are coming and saying, we need this, we need that. How do you guys handle that on the OEM side, knowing that your competitors have a completely different story to the airport?
I think some of that is the business will evolve and develop itself naturally, right? So you have some companies that are focusing in Houston or Dallas while others are not. You have some companies that are going to focus in rural delivery while Joby may not. So there's enough space. And what is incredible is that the specifications of these aircraft and the unique technology really provides us an opportunity to say, Joby's not going to fill every space. Joby's not going to do necessarily emergency response for OES, but there might be the need for CAL FIRE to develop that partnership or with some other companies, right? So I think this goes back to having the customer, where we come to the airports and say, Mr. Anwar, we want to work with you because here's our three goals: safety, customer experience, and cost effectiveness. What could work? If we can come up with a solution that says there's an ideal customer experience, there's a central location, great, it works. But if there's nobody coming to your airport, I mean, I guess that would be the caution is seek us as companies, but also don't start building until you have that baseline. There's a company that has explored an interest with you in developing that.
It's a good piece of advice.
Well, and as part of our scenario planning with SFO, one of the things that we're talking about is what are potential infrastructure business models, and do all these activities have to occur on airport property? Is there a way, for lack of a better word, to kind of triage passenger trips and say, if you're connecting to a commercial airline, you can gain entry to SFO, and if you're not, maybe there's an alternate location that is more suitable to land at. So I think it's really important as we start considering how this ecosystem could scale, maybe kind of an evolution of the policy conversation around that. And as Anwar and George and others have mentioned, safety as well as stewardship of public good really have to be our North Star. That full stop, really safety and stewardship. And so I just want to emphasize that.
And also, I haven't heard the acronym FAA mentioned yet. I mean, they're huge, right? They are the go-to folks, and obviously what they dictate. I know they came out with EB 105A, but it doesn't actually give specifics. I mean, it's a great start, but there's still a lot of ambiguity. And again, it ties into the whole timeline.
Yeah. I think that's back to George's earlier comment. I think that's the struggle from some of the airports is it's not a new service, but it's a new vehicle type with no FAA regulations about here's what you actually need to build at your airport. So I think there's a lot of hesitancy to build something that you're just going to have to scrap and rebuild later to standards.
Yeah, like with real quick, with vertiports, we don't know what is the distance that they have to be from runways. Is it, we've heard, 1,500, some people say 2,500. So that would be very helpful, right?
And Matt?
So I've always thought this, I've always likened the, if you take, for instance, a hospital, the original hospitals were a dirt floor in a cave and you received treatment from a family member. Colleges, universities were at the Parthenon on steps, informal. Airports started off with dirt runways. And so basically it titrated up from a dirt runway to something that was paved, and then you got some type of non-precision approach. Well, you guys are asking us, no offense, George, to basically, with no direction, to get ready and upscale and get ready for an infrastructure of what I don't need to provide. I don't have the knowledge yet. And so Cody knows that too. But we are ready, but I think it's incumbent on everyone here to really know how we can support the OEM drive or the AAM drive. But also, we need to basically know what is going to make sense for airports to make it scalable and affordable. And if it's not affordable for us, then it's going to be hard for us to do that.
That's a good point, right? It's working with your different companies, the different airlines, to develop that partnership, right? So that maybe you are going to have a direct customer connecting to an airline. Maybe the airport's going to be a pass-through, as you were saying, for other services that you're not necessarily using the airport, but it's just a landing location to get to other great places in Marina, hypothetically, right? So those are all things that I think it's incumbent on us as companies, whether it's Joby, Archer, Wisk, others, or other AAM companies, to essentially explain that to airports so that they begin that readiness. And I think SFO is a great model where they've brought in the different companies to kind of explain what our interests are, what are our business models. Then they can do the study and say, okay, what do our customers need? Okay, airlines, everybody else, how does this work and integrate with you? And I think that's another important element to consider, is that you're seeing airlines integrate with a lot of these companies, because there's definitely an interest at those airports to see how this can evolve and grow beyond what is just currently like the AAM operation, if you will.
I think it's a good segue to target a question for you about through the studies that you've done with the state. How is it being shaped up for the roles and responsibilities for different stakeholders in this conversation? There's a lot of viewpoints up here you can see already. What do you guys?
No, I mean that's a fair question, and I think your question acknowledges that it's not just one agency, or we're not looking to really develop advanced air mobility through one lens, right? So it's not going to be the regulatory lens. It's not going to be necessarily just the aviation safety lens. It's multifaceted, and I think that's if folks don't know about the SB 800 report, it was Senate Bill 800. Tasked the Caltrans with putting together an advisory board to develop to look at advanced air mobility from existing infrastructure point of view, and to develop a 3-year work plan to basically for actions for these state agencies to take to move us forward. And so those are the state agencies that were identified, including what used to be called the Office of Performance and Research. Now it's Land Use and Climate Integration, or I might have missed that. But there's the Air Resources Board as well. There's GoBiz, there's the Energy Commission, and there's us, and each of us have a role to play. In this, some of it is more regulatory, some of it is more economic assistance, and at least so to answer your question, these are like the state agency stakeholders. Beyond that, there needs to be engagement on all levels: local, regional, and federal.
If I may quickly add too, I think, just having seen Joby's evolution leapfrog over the last 18 months, and then Archer's evolution as well, just as a fly on the wall, I think these OEMs are going to be much, much quicker and able to fly for compensation higher well before the FAA and others are able to provide the infrastructure and integration with the airspace. That's what I'm seeing.
Adam?
Well, I tend to agree with you, and I actually think in order to unlock kind of the passenger ecosystem, we might need further regulatory reform. And what I mean by that is, when you look at like an Uber or a Lyft, and George, I know you got a lot of familiarity with this, and I know that many of the OEMs are kind of targeting kind of the ride-hailing model. From a consumer perspective, you go to book a scheduled ride to the airport or you book an on-demand ride, it's the same. It's the same consumer experience, it's the same regulatory environment, and it's the same drivers and fleet of vehicles. So I think it begs the question, if we're down the road, if we're going to need a regulatory reform that will allow OEMs to kind of cross-position between scheduled and on-demand flights for some of these short-range use cases.
Also, let's not forget the local politicians at the grassroots level. We at SFO really think that this whole ecosystem cannot flourish without their green light. They have to get involved.
What are you doing to get the green light from them right now?
Well, we have
tactics.
An entity. We've set up. It's called SFO Roundtable, and we meet every month. We bring the mayors of our surrounding cities: Millbrae, San Bruno, Palo Alto, Burlingame. These folks are very, they have strong opinions, right? And they're very close to the airport, so it's kind of a delicate balance that we have to respect. But we have brought OEMs, and they've spoken to the SFO roundtable. And as much as possible, we invite the local mayors to any event which involves air taxi discussions or planning. So I think it's absolutely critical. It might vary in other cities like Orlando, which I personally think it's going to be the first airport in the U.S. which launches OEMs, but that's like Wild West out there. They have everything. They got electricity, land,
Yeah, they're planning to design the vertiport in the short term.
build
right now,
it and they will
build
come
it.
mentality.
Yeah.
So that's like the end of the spectrum, and we are kind of maybe at the other side.
Anwar, I hope we can do a plug for SFO here because, earlier today, Saracena talked about kind of breaking down silos, at the federal level. And in large part, SFO is a really great example of you guys doing this within the airport. So, many people don't know this, but SFO has what I would call kind of a tiger team, where each on a regular cadence, they're convening all their departments to talk about issues related to AAM. And so I think that's something that other airports and other agencies could kind of replicate because it's not just going to be the finance person or the landside person or the airside person. It's going to require an integrated approach even at an airport.
Matt, I'd be interested to hear from you, both Marina and Salinas, as the airport manager during.
Sorry, what was the question?
How have you been working with your local government, municipality agencies?
Well, it first starts off as the airport sponsor, as an airport manager, really to, first of all, in a way, I don't want to say beholden to your, but you really have to reduce the barriers and have that can-do attitude. If you don't have that can-do attitude, then it does not help progress.
That's 100. I mean, having these airport officials as champions moving this issue forward is critical. I mean, Joby moved into the old Fort Ord facility. Others are operating, Salinas, Watsonville. We're taking these old, small, sleepy GA airports, renovating them, investing millions in them, bringing 800 plus jobs into Marina, Central Coast, manufacturing, et cetera, not just low end, high end, all upskilled, et cetera. But I think that's what the excitement is. You have these airport officials who are leading that conversation. You've got political officials who are interested in this. Nothing like hosting an event in downtown Santa Cruz or downtown LA or downtown San Jose at 4 to 6 o'clock. Invite those political officials and ask them if they want to drive home or take an electric taxi home in 10 minutes, right? So it has really been valuable. Anybody that drives anywhere this evening will survey you after your hour and a half drive home and ask if it would have been ideal to take it in 15 minutes and would you have paid $50 to $60, right? So I think I say that flippantly in that this is coming. What I hear from everybody here is this is coming. We're all interested. There are a few people who will say this is a terrible idea. We have all been talking about this for generations, the ability to transport. But I think it's critical to step back and answer those questions. How is this safe? How does this make sure this fits into our transportation system? How do we make sure it's quiet? Does it fit in our rules? Is it go in and out of an airport? Does it work with the state helipad system? Can it solve some problems for the state that is beyond just a rideshare system? So I think, but that's exciting to see that the potential is there.
Yeah.
Another thing too, Aaron, is I think if you have the buy-in and the support of your city manager, we have a new city manager, he's progressive, and he's got the full support I have the full support of him to make some decisions. And with that, it's very liberating. So the mantra is go as fast as you want, and then if you get ahead of your skis, I'll let you know. However, at the end of the day, you've got to be mindful of your expenses and making sure that you're not making bad decisions today that adversely affect future decisions or future outcomes. On a tangent here, there's just so many moving wheels to this whole thing that I think all of our heads continue to spin as to how do we put this all in one box. And it doesn't go in one box. And so I think when we get our new transportation AAM czar soon in California, it'll help. But I think what we all do need, though, at the end of the day is some direction from somebody, some leadership in the state of California to really help us start advancing this quicker in a more mindful way.
Sorry.
Because we've got a lot of smart people in this room, a lot of talented people, but I think all of our good ideas need to be put into one basket, more or less, and move forward with that.
So, can I piggyback off of that, and then also what George you said? I think when it comes to these, relationship building, we have to come to the table with some level of transparency and trust And I always say, like, I'm a one-trick pony. Like, all I understand and all I do is collaboration. I don't function in any other capacity. And I've found, throughout my career, is that's how you get things done. And as complex and as difficult as this is, I've worked in surface transportation, and some projects, bypasses, new freeways, freeway segments. So it's a 30-year, 40-year endeavor. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing or that's the right thing, but these issues can be worked through, they can be overcome. And I want to just say one more thing is, Adam, you were talking about the 1960s, you were talking about the supersonic era, and you were connecting it today, and I would go back 100 years. And I would go back to, who were the OEMs 100 years ago in California, and those were Lockheed, Northrop, and Douglas. And I'm very, very hopeful that, we're going to be looking decades from now, and hopefully a lot of these OEMs are established and operational, and we don't think of them as startups anymore.
So far, we've talked a lot about electrical aircraft and air taxis. What about hydrogen and drones? Because even at Hollister, Wisk, ZeroAvia, they were testing hydrogen engines there. What do you guys see beyond just air taxi, either at SFO or Salinas?
I would say SFO, with hydrogen, it's great because you can do long distance, right? You guys did an 800-mile, was it?
500.
500, so that's what, Tijuana? So
It's more regional travel, yeah.
a weekend getaway. So hydrogen would be brilliant to have, but I do know it's somewhat expensive to produce, and to reach scalability, that's
Delivery challenges too.
that's a challenge, yeah. So, there are derivatives of this whole transportation method. You got fixed wing, you got stall, you got hydrogen, you got hybrid. So it doesn't have to be 100% electric, right? So we're open to a wide array of methods. But at the end of the day, the big question is, and I'd like to bring it up, is this going to serve only the top 0.1% of the population? And if so, it is what it is. But with time, it will be democratized. It has to be with economies of scale.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot in just the past year how much drones have popped up across the nation. Not so much, I feel like, in our area, in the Bay Area and Monterey Bay Area, but because people haven't been able to get to that scale yet for the air taxi. Adam?
Well, I was just going to say, in order to really, I think, improve upon the economics, ultimately, we need better range and larger aircraft, more seats on board to divide up those fixed costs. And so whether it's improvements in batteries, whether it's hydrogen, what other fuel sources get us there, we're going to need innovation to help kind of improve kind of the economics. And hopefully we'll be able to get there.
So Matt, from a general aviation airport perspective, what is your take on hydrogen, drones, non-air taxis?
At Marina, they were doing testing with Joby was doing testing with hydrogen. It's great. The Hindenburg did us no favors, but once it becomes cost effective, then I think that's going to be a game changer. You've heard Elon Musk say that once they perfect and make it more affordable and more green, they're ditching batteries. That's one message I've heard. The tough part at the end of the day is you're taking these technologies and put it you go back to the three-letter agencies. You were literally taking these technologies of an iPhone and mating it with a toaster oven and trying to get things passed. So what I mean by that is with the way things can be so bureaucratic, we're not getting through quick enough to get things happen. So I'd love to see hydrogen be more ready, but it's not there yet. It's still very expensive. ZeroAvia, I know, is going to be going to Stockton, and money's being thrown at them to go over there. So it's a tough uphill battle.
That's a great point. You're saying using iPhone to regulate using toaster regulations, right? That's a great point because, again, with hydrogen, we have hydrogen vehicles on the road today, right? They're already driving. There's obviously a system. There are lots of them, not just one, right? But the minute you brought the question of, well, we're going to put it in a fuel cell and we're going to put it at the airport,
then the FAA
complete confusion. It's as though it was a completely new product they've never heard before. Although if you had driven the hydrogen vehicle onto the airport and parked that hydrogen-fueled vehicle, Honda, whatever it is, no one would have questioned that, right? But the minute that went a little faster and took off, or it was in fuel cell, well, we need new regs for this, obviously, because now this is a new thing we've never seen before.
Yep.
But I think it's important to recognize kind of the trend kind of in the regional market is that there's a lot of already underserved small communities in the thin haul market that general aviation airports can certainly serve, that AAM could potentially serve if the range were available. And now that regional aircraft are getting larger, it's going to be even harder to serve some of these small communities. And so I think, in my opinion, I think that this is where I think industry really should be focused is on these kind of regional thin haul use cases.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, back to the hydrogen question and how a regional airport can make it affordable. If you are near a major artery like Highway 101, where we're located in Salinas, if you have multimodalities, trucks, buses, not yet trains, but trucks, buses, cars, and hydrogen-powered eVTOLs, that makes it more affordable. It makes it more cost-effective. Cars are still at, I think, about a 200-mile range and $100 to fill up with a hydrogen tank. That's the last stat I heard. I could be wrong, but that was about a year and a half ago. So it's still expensive, but if we ride on the backs of others with the multimodalities, I think that'll be beneficial for all.
That's similar how Beta is kind of treating their electric aircraft chargers, is that they're working a lot at the airports where the rental car facilities like Hertz also charge their vehicles at the same charger to kind of help with some of those efficiencies.
Yeah, so as you can see, the recurring theme is this is a heavy lift to create and roll out this entire idea we have here.
Adam Juva.
Well, the question of charging is a really important one. If you go back to one of the images in the slide here, you'll see that airports are confronting a lot of demands for electricity, and where an airport starts is really a policy question. Do you start with the consolidated car rental? Do you start on the air side with ground vehicles? Do you start on the air side with aircraft? Where do you start? And this is going to continue to be a question because demand for power is going to continue to outstrip what airports can provide quickly.
On that I could add, being fully transparent, SFO's daily output is 42 megawatts. And if you charge one eVTOL full capacity, it consumes 0.3% of that amount. And that's just one aircraft. And so in order for us to accommodate scalability, we will have to build a third substation.
Wow.
Yet at the same time, we are planning to build Concourse H, because we want to reach our full capacity of 71 million passengers. So as I mentioned right at the beginning, it's a balancing act. Here we have our passengers, which is our bread and butter, yet here we have this wonderful emerging technology. So we have to think, how do we monetize both for the benefit of the passenger at the end of the day?
I'm going to flip over to a question. Oh, go ahead, George.
I would say that I think we have to be mindful that it's not a zero-sum game, right? In that this is the wonderful thing about having the state that we're in. At least for California, you have the state leadership both at aviation level, the California Energy Commission level, the Air Resource Board, AQMD. They're all focused on how are we reducing emissions at airports, whether that's warehouses, whether that's the fleets around those airports. This is a topic of focus at the state level. So I think that's something of value to be mindful that while we are talking eVTOL, we're one element of a broader goal of an ecosystem that the state is looking to challenge and address. So I think we should take advantage of that opportunity and look at it holistically, right? How do we do hydrogen? How do we do electric? How do we make sure the trucks' emissions are electric, as well as the warehouses, as well as the entire air quality district around the airport? So, sorry. Thank you to the state, is all I was going to say.
Question for Anwar. So, Anwar, would you consider yourselves at the full build-out at SFO landlocked, constrained for potential eVTOL support, or do you have more land to purchase or?
And you mean like ground support type stuff?
Yeah, ground support.
Beyond just landing?
Yes, we are. We are fully occupied. We don't even have space to build offices for our employees. But we've set up a fund. It's about $700 million to acquire off-airport real estate, to expand, whether it's parking garages, warehouses, even hotels, because we just can't accommodate. Every square inch at SFO is spoken for and taken. We have 4 parallel runways, very tight. So unfortunately, that's it is a problem, but there are solutions. People have approached us and said, okay, can you build a vertiport on top of one of the AirTrain stations? On top of a garage, for example. You go high when you don't have horizontal land. So we are looking at several options. But as Adam said, we're not overlooking off-airport locations.
So maybe it looks like a Teterboro, like a reliever airport for the New York area. So you might have a field, right, or a general aviation airport that has a lot of land that's available for use that is not used. So.
Yeah, that's why we like San Carlos, airports like San Carlos, Palo Alto. Those are our close allies. Which we know the day will come when we rely on them to be helping in the intra-regional eVTOL ecosystem. So you can come as airport director. You want to move up to Palo Alto?
No. Well, not until I get my own aircraft. And then
Okay.
We'll get you an eVTOL.
Yeah, there we go.
So addressing some of the questions from the audience, first one that comes to mind, I kind of dovetail on this. How are the airlines being included in the conversation? Thinking through the use case for air taxis right now has been about connecting passengers to the major international airports. So what's the role that the airlines are playing now or that they should be playing in the future?
From the OEM perspective, for example, we partnered with Delta, and that's one example where we're looking at one element of one leg of a trip where we want to have the passenger service for their SkyMile passenger to be able to book an Uber, get through their airport, and get directly to their seat. So they're calling it home to seat, right? But that's one type of service that we'll be able to offer with the aircraft. United, I think, has partnered with other airlines where they're going to purchase and run their own service, I believe. So I think there's different models for different companies, but this is also why it's important, because my 4 passengers in an aircraft are not going to impede the operations of Delta's 300-some passengers that are landing, and we're not going to be pausing their operations because at the core of it, that's the business that is driving the industry, right? So you have these airlines, and there's an understanding that we are not going to be disrupting that service, we're going to be complementing it. And we only can do that if we partner with them and work with them.
How do you plan to handle the luggage?
Working on it. I think there's a combination. So the Joby aircraft does have the ability to bring luggage, but looking to see if this is, are these going to be for 4 passengers that are taking a week in Spain on Delta, or are they doing the 45-minute leg up and down the coast, and therefore they're just taking a backpack and they have room in the bag for one carry-on. So I think that's something we're definitely evolving and growing.
There is, tremendous potential within the Bay Area. Commuters, business people with rucksacks, Livermore to San Jose, Livermore to Palo Alto, that's huge. Like Dr. Allison showed today.
SFO.
Sorry?
Get Salinas to SFO.
There you go. Bring them on.
Well, the luggage question has always been kind of an interesting one because, years ago, you go on an airplane, take many bags with you. They were all for free. And now, they charge, many of the airlines charge quite a bit of money just to carry, one bag, And it raises the question of whether or not that's going to actually impact the ecosystem, because if carry-on or checked bags start costing more than what it is to FedEx your bag to your destination, there are other options to be able to get luggage to wherever you're headed.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to the understanding the airport and the customer experience. Maybe you do have your bags checked early and you're not worrying about it, and you have that as part of your experience when you're getting it picked up, or you're going to the BART station and connecting as a multimodal experience. So there's a lot of permutations it can take.
Yeah. I think it's going to depend too on where on the airport is the vertiport located. If it's on the FBO side and you have to shuttle them across to get them there, or are they on top of the terminal and already gone through TSA? So
yeah, ideally it has to be a one-point transportation.
To really make it beneficial, yeah. So I'm going to kind of reword this question. So thinking through that you're not paying traditional fuel taxes, or you're not receiving like a fuel flowage fee because it's electric, how, either for ATC services or just at the airport, how are the airport getting fees for the usage? I've heard a couple different things, but.
I can tell you right now, at the airport in Salinas, we have 2 beta charging pods, And we are actually realizing some type of fuel flowage. It's an electrical flowage fee. So when the eVTOLs arrive, we'll start realizing those funds. So that's one way there. But in terms of PFCs, passenger facility charges, that's a Part 139 question.
They'll fix that at the feds.
Yeah.
FAA.
I know I've also
Well, it's
heard.
actually Treasury. I mean, we're working with Treasury just to be, I mean, I don't have a full answer, but we are working with Treasury, others, to determine what is that charge, energy usage equivalent to the fuel usage equivalent of energy consumption, to therefore come up with a computation of what that dollar amount should be.
And I've also heard other airports talk about like a dwelling time, kind of like it's not a landing fee, it's not a tie down fee, but while you're sitting there waiting to be charging your aircraft or waiting for people, it's like by a minute or by a time.
Yeah, that we thought of, that is actually an opportunity to monetize AAM is, like if you go to Dubai, the vertiports I've seen from the images, they have retail around the vertiports. So, they know that people, like you said, have dwell time, and it's an opportunity for them to shop, and generate money for the airport.
But right now, though, we've been really talking a lot about kind of takeoff and landing infrastructure for kind of the origin and destination. We haven't even begun to talk about what's required for emergency landing fields. Back in the day, before ETOPS, you had to have a certain number of emergency airfields, before you could fly overseas. And so is there going to be some sort of set standard for electric aircraft or for hydrogen? What is the standard? How far could you depart from those emergency fields? All of these things are questions that haven't even begun to be answered. And that's going to add into this infrastructure that may be required.
You have to be close to the water. They call it the bailout zone, because it takes forever to turn out the fire. I've heard 5 days. So if you guys have vertiports next to the bay at our airport.
Actually, we're not supposed to be on the, we can't be too far on the water yet until we're certified. But yeah.
Well, yeah,
So these are all the myths we'll figure
But
out.
you can't
though.
fly over the water too far from the shore?
We are not currently certified to be flying all over the shore, right? I mean, we have to stay as close to the shoreline as possible.
How do you do in New York
for
City?
emergency
Yeah, that's what I
landing.
said. It's better to be closer to the water
Thank
than a freeway.
Oh, yeah.
Freeway is tough, so.
But I will answer that question of the 4 out of the 6 lanes of the freeway. We could just fly above them. You could just keep the lanes, but you can watch the traffic moving above you as you wait.
Fifth Element style, right?
Right. So.
Okay, so if OEM is designing next generation 747 and has clients in the airline industry, how often are you working with the airports? What's the current process and what can be learned from that? So, how often are you talking to airports?
I'm talking about, I think the question is if someone builds a 747, do they call the airport manager, right?
Yeah.
I don't think so, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a sarcastic question, maybe?
I think I was taking to inferring it like when we were building the 747s, what you're saying, but I could be.
I don't know.
But whoever put it up there would like to volunteer to say
Well,
that.
I mean, when the A380, when the A380 Airbus.
It's a question in terms of when, let's say, an airline company, whether it's manned or unmanned, is putting the next generation aircraft, how often do they work with the airports versus the airline company that will purchase the aircraft and then fly that aircraft from an OEM? So you've got Boeing or Airbus, let's take 2 examples. How often do they come to the airport and say, hey, we're developing this with a 2-foot extra on the nose. How much do you have to change the whole airport to meet that need? Well, actually, Alaska Airlines is landing at that point.
So in case you guys didn't hear, it's kind of relating how we do today with aircraft when there's modifications to aircraft and new designs. Think of like the 777 that might disrupt how an airport is laid out. What lessons learned have we taken from that for OEMs with this new aircraft type?
Yeah, I guess that's a question for the airports, right? Is who do you talk to when someone builds a new 747? Does Boeing call you or does the airline, right? Does Boeing call you or does the airline call you? And I think that's what's unique. I think maybe you're pointing out that's what's unique about Joby and eVTOL is for the first time, you won't be able to just point fingers. You will just say, Joby or Archer, they built it, they operate it, they're the ones responsible, go talk to them. Whereas I think the question is saying right now, who's responsible? If you build a new aircraft that doesn't fit your airport, who calls the airport? Does Boeing call you? Does an airline call you? Does anybody talk to you about the plane?
Everybody does. I mean, everybody comes together at the table, right, in the food chain. you have the airlines, you have the operators, and then you have the FAA, and within the airports you have aviation security, ConOps, you name it.
Yeah.
You know, just for the configuration of the gates and the design of the gates and the flow of the passengers, huge. And right at the top, anytime you introduce a new aircraft, NASA gets involved. So there's a whole food chain of incredible jurisdiction. But at the end of the day, it takes time and it works.
And that's the model that I think that may be the point, is that's what we're essentially learning to follow, is that we have to go in with the FAA, with Delta, with everybody, with ANWR, ConOps, TSA, et cetera.
I appreciate being able to respond because I couldn't put any more words.
It's a great question.
All right.
A lot of lawyers in the room, I can tell you that.
All right, this might be the last question. What are the plans for emergency standards, and how do you plan to handle emergencies that might occur mid-flight? I think that might be to you, George. For the mid-flight, how do you plan to handle?
Yeah, I think there's two
mid-flight?
components. There's the aircraft, and then there's the service. I think in terms of the aircraft, that's all part of the FAA certification process. They do have to have a safety management system in place that is designed for all of those issues, and that includes everything from fire suppression to landing to emergency response to critical failure. Those are all part of the decades or so of rigorous testing. Mid-flight, I'm not sure where we are with that in terms of the actual service, but I imagine that would be the same protocols that would have to fly for certification as well.
From an airport, are you guys thinking through that, training firefighters to handle electrical fires?
The only things we're doing now is just responding to testing. If there's a mishap or an upset, then we have fire there, ready and able to help out. But no. Anwar?
Yes, SFO, no, I mean, that is still, I mean, we do have a kind of a work plan developed, right? But that is kind of more on the minutia side. We haven't got there yet, but it's coming. Yeah.
Let's see if anyone else is putting any questions in. Okay. So what would it take? I think this might be to anyone. What would it take for you to go ahead and say, I am all in and I'm going to invest and build a vertiport at my airport? Is there something you can think off the top of your head that would just be like, yep, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to go ahead and spend the money.
If there is an airport in our key urban congested markets that is willing to put a vertiport in the central terminal area to create an ideal customer experience, and it have the existing power capacity of 2 Tesla superchargers, we can be up and running within a year.
Sounds like Orlando.
Or SFO, or San Jose.
So Matt or Anwar, what would it take for you guys to go ahead and pull the trigger and say,
They're
yep.
already operating, right?
Yeah. We are.
But to put in the infrastructure, what would it take for you guys, you think?
Something I could defend to city council, city manager, and the constituents. At the end of the day, I mean, I just don't want to build something that is not going to serve the public. And if we aren't serving the public, then I'm not doing my job. So if we have a good argument and a good use case and good data, as I said earlier, then yeah, full steam ahead. But until we get these marching orders from the OEMs, it's hard to do that. But I know you guys are, I mean, we've had these conversations and you're getting close. They're busy recombining DNA and beyond the
Is there anything
shed.
you could think of, Adam, that would just really help put it over the line for an airport?
Well, I think it gets down to this idea of stewardship. And I think we need the public and private sectors to really come together on this. More important than the P3s that we talked about earlier, which are very important, we need a commitment not only to safety, but to stewardship of the public good. And let those two things drive policy, because we're still going to need a lot of policy evolution before we grow and scale the ecosystem.
You know, if I may real quick.
Yep.
We've got a lot of smart people in this room and a lot of smart people in the industry. If we can get a consensus and an understanding of what needs to happen to put people in an aircraft and safely fly them from point A to point B, we can do it. But we can't do it alone. And so if we work as a team, I know it's hard to do, but we can do it though. There are plenty of people that can put this together in short order.
For us, yeah, I would say it needs transparency, collaboration, and 100% confidence in the demand, that there is quantifiable demand, that people are actually going to use it. So far, it's just been anecdotal. It's like, okay, people, they commute, therefore they will use this. But there's no proof of that. Once we have that proof, right,
That's what's gonna
and the public trust, then we'll invest hard dollars.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you guys very much. Thank you guys for the questions. Let's back it in.